In this performance, the unique humor and exceptional skills of Dr. Richard Bandler are demonstrated as he shows how to create resource states and a compelling future. As you watch and follow along, you may well find your life changing for the better.
Well. Let's see. What have we got left to talk about? Some of you gave me questions, and there was one that was repeatedly asked, and it concerns me a little bit, because a lot of you kept saying, asking me questions that sort of boiled down to the following. It was like, what was the most difficult person you ever worked with? And that's an interesting ambiguity if you think about it. But you see, the thing is it's not that difficulty isn't something that makes something bad. Difficulty is what makes something interesting. And if you stop and think about it, once I figured out things that made phobias go away, so the first phobia thing, I had people see themselves in the situation as a slide and float up and watch themselves watching themselves and remain comfortable while they ran the movie. And it seemed to get rid of most phobias, that doing disassociation was a good way to start. Then I realized that if you started at the end of memories and rewound them backwards, that it flattened out the neurons, and it had a very powerful effect. I went a step further and found out that if you take the feelings that people have of being frightened and pull them out in front of them and flip them upside down and start rotating them in the opposite direction, that you could get rid of most fears and anxieties and all kinds of stuff. But you see, to me, what I was really looking for when I had a way of working with people's fears, I was more interested in the person with which it didn't work than the ones which it did. It's not because someone's difficult. I mean, there certainly were very difficult situations. I mean, having to work with people who had been hospitalized and drugged and electric shock treatment. I had one person who still had tremors all over their face because they'd had like 8, 10 different things of 16 electric shock treatments, and their body was just ripped from it, basically. And I spent lots and lots of time doing body work. One of the reasons that I've kept switching from thing to thing, first I studied this, and then I studied that. I did hypnosis, and then I got Moshe Feldenkrais to teach me the things he knew. I tried all kinds of stuff. I tried Rolfing. Rolfing hurts, by the way. I'm not into pain. It was much too painful for me. A guy rolfed me and I whacked him in the head. All right, and he goes, "Why did you do that?" And I said, "I thought you thought pain was good." And he said, "Well," he goes, "No," he goes, "the only way to relax a muscle is to tension it." And I said, "So you tensed muscles," and they took their knuckles and dragged them through. Nowadays, most of the advanced rolfers have figured out that that's not the best idea. Just because the theory says something doesn't make it true. And that's true about NLP. NLP is just the name I gave to a series of techniques, and mostly an attitude that says if something doesn't work, do something else. That when I came up against people that I didn't know what to do, I explored every place I could find. I read everything about neurology. Now, one of the toughest cases that I came up against was there was a guy that had serious auditory hallucinations. He'd been hospitalized a number of times. And he'd be just normal as normal could be, and all of a sudden he would hear these terrible voices, and he would begin screaming back at the screaming voices, and of course then some nice person would come along and go, "There's nobody there," and he would go, "Shut up," and start yelling back at them, and then he would put his hands over his ears, but of course it didn't stop the voices, and so some nice doctor said, "Well, we should hospitalize him." Because you know how sane you'll get if they lock you up with a lot of other crazy people and give you drugs. And sometimes, even when he was hospitalized, after a period of time, the symptoms would subside. And they even released him twice, and he went back, but they got more and more severe. Now, I read a lot of books about auditory hallucinations and different things. I try to read as much as I can, especially in journals, where people are saying the most current things. And I read an article that said that auditory hallucinations can be caused by sometimes if people have something lodged in their brain. And I just thought, you know, I'd asked the guy and I said, "Have you ever had anything lodged in your brain?" And because I tried hypnotizing him and shutting off the voices, and I could get them to stop, but they would come right back after a while. And I got finger signals that said they wouldn't come back, but they came back. And so I had a friend who was a neurologist, and at those times we didn't have MRIs, but the guy gave him some x-rays or something, and he found a big piece of metal in his head from the Korean War. The guy had gotten near an exploding grenade, and they thought they got all the fragments out, but apparently they missed one. And when he had it removed, it got rid of the hallucinations. It wasn't based on anything I did other than be tenacious about finding things out. Nobody knows all the answers. One of you asked me about something about treating somebody that had paralysis. To me, paralysis falls into two categories. Either something is frozen or something is limp. And those are very different. The first person I ever worked with that had paralysis had a Broca's stroke. And a Broca's stroke is up here in the brain, and his hand was paralyzed like this. And part of his face was flaccid, and his language was very strange, because he said things like, me, you, flower, trees, wind. And now you could look at it as word salad, but if you read about a Broca's stroke, this is a normal thing that happens. The language, they can understand perfectly, but they can't speak perfectly. And it's just, however it's connected wrong, it just doesn't work right. But the other hemisphere has got melody in it. So even before, now they have something called melodic intonation therapy, where they teach people to sing. Instead of going, Mary had a little lamb, you go, I would like a cup of coffee, so that people can relearn to use their speech centers. Now, with me, I kept looking at the guy with the Broca's stroke with his hand like this, and I kept thinking, where's his hand going? And, well, the stroke is up here, the handle's like this. It kind of looked like it was on the way. The physical therapist kept taking his hand and trying to pry it open. They kept taking his hand and taking his fingers and doing this, and it wasn't doing much. And his wife actually asked me if I would see him, and when I went in and I kept looking at him, and he kept talking semi-word salad to me, I knew he could understand perfectly, so I thought, well, probably what he needs to do is to relax. But before he can relax, like most stress-related things, then I used to run an executive program, and the first thing I would do with executives was get them to finish everything you could finish in their office. Pick up the phone, hang it up, open the filing cabinet, close it, open and close every drawer, open and close every window, open and close everything, because constantly throughout the course of the day, we start things and we're interrupted. And if we have the signal in the hand, in order to be staying like this, isn't saying nothing, it's going yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, so it gets stuck. Which means it's not that it's inactive, but in fact, it's overactive. Now, unfortunately, paralysis is a real pain in the ass. I know personally because I've had it before. Somebody said, well, you know, Richard, you said that, you know, they said you wouldn't walk. Well, actually, not everybody said that. One of the doctors said I was going to be fine. And the other doctor said I wouldn't ever be able to walk again. And I chose who I was going to listen to. The doctor that said I was going to be fine, maybe he was just being nice, but I don't think so. I think he really believed that you could recover from the kind of paralysis that I had as a result of a stroke. Because just because something doesn't work normally doesn't mean it won't work at all. When I took the guy with the Broca's stroke and I started pushing his hand up, all of a sudden his hand opened up and I went like this and it fell down. Now, I don't know what made that work. I don't have to know. My job is just to try it. They kept trying to push it the other way, and it wasn't working. So I just always try the opposite of everything. If scolding children and telling them, well, you're not artistic, isn't working, then I'll go, well, maybe you are. You know, why not? It's free. You know, if I can take adults that have been resisting something for 30 years, and next thing you know, they're throwing paint in the air, probably anything is possible. Now, I know that when I've worked with serious things, it requires a real sense of determination. I never said that I know the stories are cute and everything, but it doesn't mean that it's not heartbreaking when you see these people and they're locked up in hospitals. There was this poor gentleman that was hallucinating snakes. He'd been an executive at a company. He was the CEO of a company in his own office one day, and all of a sudden he starts screaming snakes. Now, his secretary went, snakes, because she didn't like snakes either, but there were no snakes. So she called the paramedics because he was freaking out and running around, and the paramedics came in and saw no snakes. So they strapped him down. Now, I don't know about you. If I'm being chased by snakes, I wouldn't want to be strapped down. And they strapped this guy down, and they sedated him and brought him to a hospital. And when he woke up, he was still screaming snakes. So they took him from that hospital to another hospital, where they strapped him down and put him in a room he couldn't get out of, so he can't even run away from the snakes. Now, I agree they were hallucinated snakes, till I got there. Well, the doctor told me, and I listened to the doctor. He said, well, he goes, Dr. Bandler, I know that you've had some success in the past, but this is a really serious psychotic episode. And I said, yes, but I'm asking about the patient. And he goes, that's not funny. And I said, I think it's funny. Because if you don't have a sense of humor, you start to believe everything you're told. And to me, that seriousness is one of the greatest diseases. And by disease, I mean it's what creates stress in people. It's what creates fears. It's what stops people from trying things. The doctor told me, he said, Val, he says, as long as this guy can't sort out the difference between what he's hallucinating and what's real, he's going to have to stay in the hospital. And I thought, well, this shouldn't be so hard. So I went for a little walk downtown, and when I was walking down, I saw this store that said reptiles. And I don't know, it's just the kind of guy I am. I went in, and they had a big barrel of rubber snakes. Now, when I looked at the barrel of rubber snakes, something in my mind went, these are real. Even though they're rubber, they're still real. And so I asked the guy, I said, can I rent this barrel of snakes? And the guy looked at me like I had come from Jupiter. And he goes, I sell the snakes. I don't rent them. And I said, well, I don't really need to own them. I just need them for a couple hours. And he goes, well, why don't you just buy one? And I said, because I need them all. And he goes, what are you going to do? And I said, I am going to cure schizophrenia. Now, since he wasn't a doctor, he looked at me and he went, cool. He said, can I come? And I went, okay. If I can use your snakes, you can come with me. So he put the snakes onto a dolly, and we went into the back, and he was making a cup of tea. He wasn't even English. He was just having a cup of tea. Some people in the rest of the world drink tea, too. And, but not me. If I'm going to drink something, I want it to do something to me. It's like I went in the other day and said I'd have a quadruple espresso. And the guy looked at me and he said, that's awfully strong. And I said, yeah, I know, but I need to go to bed soon. I love the look on their face when they go, I'm a bit hyperactive. I mean, that's the thing about giving kids Ritalin. I have a lot of trouble with that. I just think that if you keep taking drugs, the whole time you're growing up, that, eventually they're just going to habituate or something. And you've got to get beyond it at some point. There has to be some way where you start taking them and then stop taking them or something, a change of diet, maybe a change of attitude, maybe a little trance. Or my first solution was, since Ritalin is really speed, that's what it is. If you give it to a normal person, it pumps them way up. It's like methadone or any of that kind of stuff. And, hyperactive kids supposedly react to it differently, although they look like little burned out speed freaks to me. Having grown up in the 60s, I recognize it. A lot of my friends had that same look on their face. They could fold a napkin over and over again. No problem concentrating. But see, I just thought, what a great idea. Because when my son, they said, well, he's hyperactive. We want to give him Ritalin. And I said, well, I thought Nancy Reagan said, say no to drugs. I listened to Nancy. And they said, well, these aren't street drugs. These are pharmaceuticals. And I said, you're not a doctor. You're a school counselor. But I have a solution. So I went to the school board, and I went in, and I said, they tell me my son's hyperactive. He doesn't seem very hyperactive to me. And I could tell they were going, uh-oh, this is going to be trouble. And I said, I think what we should do is take all the speed away from all these kids and give it to the teachers so they can keep up. Since it's not harmful to your health. Because to me, I don't know, that's a big jump to make, to say that, studies have proved, of course you can concentrate better if you take, something like that, but you know, I mean, that's why in the middle of the night when I lose track of what I'm writing, I'll drink a couple cups of coffee. You know, I dedicated a book to Folger's coffee. You know, it doesn't surprise me that this is a solution, but it can't be the only solution. We've got to start exploring the way in which brains are capable of creating good chemicals. Now, with this guy, when we got to the hospital, before we left, his lamp came over to me. Turned out it wasn't a lamp, it was a big snake, big boa constrictor. Her name was Alice, and Alice was a people snake. Alice loved people. She had big eyes, and she'd look at you like this. And I grew up in the city. I'm not real comfortable around animals that aren't in the city. It's not a dog, a cat, you know. It's just, I'm not used to being around them. So being around a snake that's 16 feet long that wants to be friends with you, I was a bit uncomfortable, I have to admit. And especially when it started wrapping itself around me and looking at me like this. And, you know, it had its big teeth and, you know, and he goes, don't worry, Alice loves people. So he took Alice, and he had 2 cobras or something. I don't know what they were. They had little hoods, and they looked at you. And he had trained them to do things, but he brought those along and put them in a bag. And when we got to the hospital, it was a private hospital, and we went to the front door. The nurse said, what's in the barrel? And I said, snakes. And she wrote snakes down. She goes, and the bag? And I said, more snakes. And she went, more snakes. She goes, you'll have to sign here. And she goes, are you leaving the snakes? I said, no, we're just bringing them in for a visit. But she was very nonchalant about it, and we put them in the shower. Now, I don't know how many of you saw Raiders of the Lost Ark. You know that scene in Raiders of the Lost Ark with all the snakes? That's what the shower looked like. We put the rubber snakes all over the floor, turned on the shower head, and the water was coming around, and they were walking all over, bouncing around. We put Alice on the shower head. It was a long, big, you know, hospital shower thing, and put Alice up there and put the other snakes up on the wall, and took this guy who is now kind of burned out. He stopped screaming snakes and kind of went into a semi-catatonic state. And he was in a wheelchair, and he was kind of strapped in, and he had some tubes sticking out of him and stuff, because he'd oscillate between having his psychotic episodes and then kind of going into a semi-catatonic state. And I just wanted to give him a firm grasp of reality, because the psychiatrist said he couldn't tell the difference. And I had a feeling he could. But I had to test it. So when we rolled this guy into the shower, and he was in the wheelchair and went out in the other room, I handed everybody a towel to laugh in. And we had a little camera in there so we could see what he was doing. This guy started screaming his head off, just like he had done in the first psychotic episode. He was yelling, snakes! But he couldn't get up because he was strapped down. And that made it kind of tough on him, I think. But they believed in such things. And for me, at this point, it worked out pretty good, because he was no longer really kind of spaced out. He was fully alert and screaming his head off. And everybody started to rush in. I said, no, give him a moment, you know. I want him to know what snakes really look like. And of course, Alice is winding down because she likes people. And she's hanging off, trying to get to him. And he's looking at this big snake coming down from the shower thing and all the snakes in the water. And he's screaming, and it sounded like, you know, some sort of primal scream. Snakes! And at that point, I thought, well, maybe he's ready. And so I walked in, and I walked up to him. I had to walk through the water with all the snakes in it, too. And Alice looked at me like, hello, and I went, stay away from me, you. And I looked at him, and I said, excuse me, sir. And he looked at me and went, snakes! And I said, yeah, I know, snakes. Everywhere snakes. Snakes, 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 snakes. I said, you show me which ones are hallucinated snakes, which ones are real snakes, and I'll roll you out of here. Otherwise, you're spending the night. The look in his face was priceless. I do love so to have someone's attention. And he looked at me like this, still strapped down, and he goes, so hallucinated snakes, rubber snakes, real snake. Just that fast, sorted it right out. I didn't even ask him about the rubber snakes. He knew that on his own. They looked very real to me. But then I'm easily influenced. Now, so I rolled him out, and when he got out, I said, now, can you still see hallucinated snakes? And he goes, yeah. I said, what's the difference between the big snake and the hallucinated states. He goes, well, you can kind of see through those ones, which is not out of the ordinary for people when they hallucinate. I know some of you are nodding yes. What the hell is that about? Like some of you are going, well, of course they are. We knew that. You people are dangerous. They go, wow, whenever I hallucinate snakes, I can see through them. See, if you'd have told me that, I wouldn't have had to do this to him. I just didn't know, you know. I didn't hallucinate snakes. I hallucinated other things. But see, once you give people the foundation to tell the difference between things, you know, then it makes all the difference in the world. When there was a guy at the mental hospital one time when I very first went with Virginia who kept coming up and asking me, he goes, did you see the dead baby float through the room? And I went, this room? And he went, yeah. And the psychiatrist walked up and went, there are no dead babies. Well, I think that's a bit of an overgeneralization. But certainly there weren't floating across. And then he asked me, he said, did you see a dead baby on a hot dog bun? And I thought, this guy is a little wacky. But not any wackier than some of the musicians I played with. I mean, he was, of course, a little bit out of touch with reality. But the reason he must have been asking was because he wanted to know, which meant he couldn't tell the difference between the things that he hallucinated floating through the room. So he was asking, did you see that too? Which doesn't seem to me an unreasonable thing to do. The trouble is that even if you say yes or you say no, he still can't tell. And he can't tell because he doesn't know how to know what's going to be shared reality and what's not. Most of you have a way of telling. It's not that you don't see things that aren't there. Some of you look at your car keys and they disappear. How do you do that? You hallucinate the table over the top of them. Happens all the time. It's not out of the ordinary. Sometimes you look and see somebody and you look back and they're not there. And you go, I thought so-and-so was here, and it wasn't there. You just saw them. But we're capable of doing this. I've done hypnosis for years, and I've had people hallucinate 6-foot French poodles. It's not that there is a 6-foot French poodle. It's not a cosmic event. It's not coming out of the ether plane. It's just one of the things we're capable of doing. Interior decorators walk into houses all the time and see furniture that's not there. We don't put them in a mental hospital. However, on TV this morning, there was a very religious man, and the news broadcaster said, well, don't you think it's kind of over the top for a religion to get to dictate to politicians that certain people who aren't a member of their religion have to follow their rules? And of course the guy said, well, what are you talking about? And he goes, well, there are some people that, you know, that have prolonged, very excruciatingly painful diseases that aren't going to get any better, and they decide that they want to die. And he goes, how can you make it so they're unable to? And he goes, because it's wrong. That's pretty simple, because after all, he's got a direct relationship with God. And after all, what he thinks is right and wrong is more important than people having personal freedom. I don't like the idea of suicide, but as soon as somebody has a choice, and now I think that's the important part, as soon as you educate them in how to not have pain, you know, then they could really make a choice. I worked a lot at a place called the Center for Pain. I don't think it's a very good name for it. It should be the Center for Ending Discomfort. You know, I worked also at a place called the Center for Mental Retardation, and it was. People give me their card, and it goes, alcoholic counselor, and I go, give up drinking, will you? You know, it's, you know. My favorite one is this guy gave me his card, and it said that he worked at the Center for Impotency. And I thought, oh. You know, and I said, you know, you could be cured of this. And he goes, you know, and he goes, well, he goes, hey, I like it because he said to me, he goes, I have no sexual problems. And I went, right, no sexual problems. That's N-O-W. And he went, no. And 3 no's, of course, don't make a yes, or something like that. It doesn't worry me at all. What worries me is that when you ask questions about what can be difficult and what can be hard, see, it's all going to be difficult and hard compared to eating a popsicle, but it's what makes things worthwhile. The people today that started doing art, that's just the beginning. The fact they could do that in a few moments means if they really start doing it, on a regular basis, a year from now, they're going to start doing really wonderful things. You don't sit down and write a great symphony in the first 5 minutes. But once you realize that you can control sound and you can make music, that you can write things, most people look at a blank page and they go, I don't know what to say. Hey, the best device for writing is a pair of scissors. You just write a lot of stuff and cut out all the bad stuff. And then, then you write something else, and then you figure out how to get from one to the other. And you start putting pieces together. And you start imagining that somebody is listening to it. As soon as you begin to add other strategies and other techniques, other things become possible. But if you move into the world with doubt, you will be filled with it. If you're looking for what can go wrong, you will find it. If you're looking for what makes something impossible, then you'll find it. I never asked questions like, what would make it impossible to ever have this person get out of the hospital and have a relatively normal life? It's not that, because the people I live with aren't even normal. I'm not normal by any standards, and I don't even want to be. To me, it's not about that. But if they put me for my beliefs, Jesus, a couple hundred years ago, they'd have burned me at the stake. I think Paul McKenna was the last witch tried in this country. Paul hypnotized me and made me into a babbling idiot. Excuse me if people start out babbling idiots. I know I've taught seminars for 35 years, and I've had people ask me some of the weirdest questions you could possibly imagine. I show people how to work with phobias, and they raise their hand and go, does this work with insomniacs? And I go, no, it works with phobics. And they go, well, yeah, but why can't you use it with insomniacs? And I said, because when people are terrified, they're not really sleepy. And they go, I said, it's just not the same thing. It's like, why can't you put tires in the gas tank? Because it won't help, that's what. You can, it just won't do any good. Some things do some things and some things don't. Now, to me, I think that one of the things that's transpired is that when you see that things are possible, you start thinking, well, what don't I know how to do? Well, the truth is, lots of things. But if you have a sense of adventure, then you can begin to explore. There's millions and millions and millions of books on everything. Some of them are absolutely idiotic, but it doesn't mean it won't give you good ideas. Sometimes, just by listening to what it is that people say is impossible, it makes me want to do it. Can't help it. It's in my nature, because I have a real sense of adventure about trying things. When they say, oh, the catatonic, they have no input whatsoever. I just really find that hard to believe that, through the surface of your skin, you're not going to feel anything. When I stub my toe, I just really find it hard to believe you wouldn't notice that. Maybe it's just not enough, because, what they're really looking for is, what is it that's going to make it so that people suddenly become like an everyday average person? I'm not looking for that. I'm looking for what makes people exceptional. I like to take problems and optimize them. When I worked at Marshall University, those films they made some years ago, here's a guy who has psychotic episodes if he gets near the edge of town. Now, I thought, and to me, when I listened, I thought, Jesus, what planning this must take. You have to, because I said, how many ways out of town are there? And he goes, 6. And I go, have you tried them all? And he went, oh, yes. And I went, how many times? And he went, I tried each one once. Well, that's not really tenacious if you think about it. What if he got to the edge of town and got off the road and just walked around? And it was fine. And we're not even talking about being trapped in New York. We're talking about Huntington, West Virginia. I hear dueling banjos. This is a town where, there's not a lot going on. If you're going to be trapped somewhere, get trapped somewhere big. Get trapped in London. It's 50 square miles, and you can't even tell where the edge of town is. It doesn't have an edge, because I'm always in the taxi cab. I go, are we still in London? And they go, yep. And I go, are we still in London? Yep. Then you go, are we still in London? They go, no, we've been out of London for a while. And I go, nothing has changed. And they go, what do you mean nothing's changed? We're way outside of London now. Because to him, the taxi cab driver, it's totally different. To me, it looks exactly the same. When I grew up in the Bay Area in California, you used to drive out of town and through all the country and through orchards and then into the next town. It's now all one humongous suburb and factory. And, you know, you can't tell where one place begins and the other ends. And, you know, I guess they call that progress, you know. To me, the thing that makes real progress is when inside the people have better lives and outside they do as well. Now, I wanted to do something just for the purpose of demonstration, of course. And will somebody help me here? Yes, sir. What's your name? Barry. Barry? I need one other person. What's your name, ma'am?
Fiona.
Fiona. What a great name. I love that. I read poetry by a woman named Fiona MacLeod, and she turned out to be a guy. I guess that's some kind of English thing or something. I don't know. No, he was Scottish, actually. But will you come down here? I'm just going to ask you a few questions. Yeah, let's come here and sit down. What's your name again, sir? Barry. Okay. Now, let me ask you this, Barry. You know, are there some times where you're presented with things? What do you do for a living, Barry?
I work for a software company, and I sell sales.
So you sell things?
Software.
It doesn't matter what it is. You sell things. I want to know what you do for a living. Not where you work or what they call you or anything like that. I want to know, like, when you go to work, what are you supposed to do when you get there? You're supposed to sell stuff, right?
Yeah.
So, like, do you call on the phone and sell stuff, or do you go places and sell stuff?
Go places, research it, go places.
I beg your pardon?
Research, go places, and sell.
You research, go places?
Yeah, we research the market, and then we go to...
So you fool around for a while, and then
Yeah.
you go places?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, dear. Let's sit here. So like when you go places, sometimes you meet people, and something inside you probably goes, this is never going to work.
Yeah.
Right? That's a really good attitude. Because sometimes you go in and you go, this is going to be easy. Right? Because you know exactly what to say, and you could tell that the person's receptive, you know. And, okay, now let me tell you a secret about all those other people. Because, see, when you get in the business of selling things, there are some people that you can sell to. But I guarantee you the rest of them buy stuff. If you have any doubt, go over their house and look in their closet, in their garage. Some of them even have storage sheds like me. I have sheds, and when I'm dead, people are going to go through them and archive my life because I've never gotten rid of anything ever. My wife wouldn't let me. I think I have. My wife has clothes from when she was 12 years old, and she's not even alive anymore, but I still can't sell it because she told me never sell it. You know, and I'm just very responsible. I went, yes, dear. And sometimes I go out there and I go, I'm going to get rid of this. And so I hear this voice coming from somewhere. And I'm not taking any chances. But if you could change the way in which you approach these people, not only would it increase the amount of money you make, it would extend the range. Because see, you either have to find more of the people that are easy to sell to, or you have to be able to generate behaviors that contact more people. And I know for a fact that somewhere inside you, the attitude to do this exists, but it doesn't exist in doubt. The trouble with doubt is that people go, oh, I don't think so. Research has shown. That's the quickest way out of having to learn something. I used to hear this a lot. They told me research has shown you could take two people who are twins, separate them at birth, right? And they're twins and they both go nuts. So therefore schizophrenia must be genetic. Or being separated at birth that makes you crazy. Or lots of other possibilities. Or having psychiatrists examine you later on in life is not good for your mental health. You know, I know that they proved that having rats around researchers is dangerous for the rats. If we ever want rats to go completely psycho, we know that we have a whole body of research for it. But to me, the thing that I'm really interested in is more about determination. There are some things where you've just decided in your life you're going to do this no matter what. Has there ever been anything like that?
Yeah.
Yeah? You can feel the juices seeping in your body already, can't you? That's right. Watch this. I know how to juggle. Now, take that idea, let it seep down in your mind, right? Because that's a good feeling, isn't it? Right? And whatever it is, it doesn't even matter. You don't have to tell us. If you close your eyes now and go back, see what you saw at the time, hear what you heard, till the feelings begin to creep back in your body. Notice where they start. Does it start in your shoulders? Does it start in your nose? Does it start on the front? And then double the size of the picture and turn up the brightness. Turn up the volume so it begins to move through your body, and notice what direction it is. And then if you notice how it's moving, move it faster. Start at the beginning and run it back through again. Start at the beginning and run it through again so that it begins to amplify. Because what you're doing now is memorizing something you did well, where you were successful in spite of the odds, in spite of what normal people might have looked at it and done. It's one of the instances in your life where you got to the point where you could surprise yourself delightfully and succeed. Now, if you keep this feeling, spin it faster. Bzzz. That's right. Spin it even faster. Bzzz. That's right. Double it again. Now, I'm going to reach over and I'm going to pick up your hand. And what I want to do in a moment is to have you just open your eyes, but not yet. When you do, I want you to look at your hand, and the closer it gets to your face, the stronger I want this feeling to be. Because if you can take this good feeling, curl your toes back, and make it so that it begins to become something that vibrates inside you. The trick is not to focus on your difficulties, but to focus on your strong parts. Make it fill your life. Okay, I'm going to count to 3, and when you do, I want you to open your eyes. Your hand's going to come closer, and as it does so, I want the feeling to get stronger and stronger. Here we go. 1, 2, 3. Bzzz. That's right. Closer, 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 stronger, closer. That's right. Now close your eyes right there. And I want you to see something with one of these people where you hesitated. Because I think hesitation is a major difficulty. And I want you, as you see it, to feel this. Getting closer and closer and closer. And at the moment it touches your face, I want you to begin to see all the things you didn't try, and hear your voice changing, and feel differently. Because if nothing else, these people offer you the opportunity to try a few new things, to try to be a little different, to try and find solutions. Because if nothing's going to work, then nothing ventured, nothing gained. And really surprise yourself delightfully now. That's right. Now I'm going to put your hand down, and I want you to drop deeply into an altered state, way down. That's right. And as you do, let your imagination start to run away with you. How you doing, dear?
Well, thank you.
Oh, it's a ring. I love rings. I'm a jewelry junkie, in case you haven't noticed. You know, it's just one of those things in life. I like to decorate everything. You know, it's. I tried to decorate a plane once, and they got really mad at me. So it's nowadays, they think you were a terrorist. If you planted a flower on a plane, they go, you know, life's gotten much more complicated. You used to be able to walk into the airport, and now you have to go through machines, and they have to check you. You know, people are making life too complicated, I think. But I'd rather they didn't blow up the plane, so I guess it's worth the effort, don't you think? You know, I mean, it's, to me, that guy that tried to blow his shoe up, I thought, excuse me, but if I saw somebody trying to light their shoe on fire in the plane, I'd beat the crap out of them, too. It's like, don't anybody move or the shoe goes. You know, my wife would have gone, no, not the shoe, anything but the shoe. She trained my dog to only chew my shoes. Isn't that something? It's amazing what you can teach an animal to do. Now, let me ask you, are there things that you hesitate to do that you really think you should?
Yes.
Yes, there is. And of course, you know, she who hesitates waits. That's my theory. And waits, and waits, and waits. Okay, I tell you what, I'm going to turn and have you face me for a minute, okay? Because there's no need to hesitate, because I know how to do this real quick. That's right. Close your eyes. There you go. Just relax. Let go. That's right. Because all I want you to do is to go inside, and I want you to think of one time in your life where you felt absolutely wonderful, and nothing was going to get in your way. I know every woman's felt that way at least once, if not more often. That's it. You got it. Double it, double it, double it again. Keep it spinning from deep within. Because it's not through worries and through pain and through regret and worrying about the past that you design a good future. What I want you to do is take this feeling right here. That's right. Double it again. And when you get it spinning, I want to start multiplying it. Let it spread. Curl your toes back. Get it in your feet. Get it in the back of your knees, the front of your knees, your elbows, even in your ears and the back of your head. Let it spread all over you. And as you do so, let an image of what you've hesitated to do come up. Only this time feel differently. Because if you plan to feel differently in the future, you will. If you take your feelings and go, you'll think of new things to try. Now, take that good feeling and think of something surprising. Maybe even something that makes you giggle a little bit. Just like a TV, you smack it and the picture goes straight. Some people, Jiminy Crickets. You know, at least I didn't have to kick him like the last one, boy. I had to kick him in the nuts really hard. Now, if you take that good feeling, suddenly you'll begin to think to yourself. I want you to say, and remember, it's your own internal voices. If you have internal voices that whine and nag and go, oh, well, you better not, you know what I'm talking about. Take them and move them off into the distance and put something silly in its place. Just think if Sylvester the cat were telling you the same thing. Thuffer and thuckatash, you should never do that. If you do that, you'll be so embarrassed. Everybody will laugh at you. Oh, no. You wouldn't take it seriously. But if you use a very serious voice, then you get serious results instead of a little laughter, which goes a lot further towards being happy. Plus, you know, I've heard there's a side effect to it, though. You have to be very careful. It makes sex 4 times better and 4 times as long. Because if you change the voices in your head and make them see, I just think if you're going to have self-doubt, wouldn't it be nice if you had the sexiest self-doubt of anybody? Most people have a self-doubt that's really critical, and I'm not into self-criticism. I want a voice inside my head that goes, you'll never amount to anything. My son bought this GPS system, and it's got the sexiest woman on it you could possibly imagine. I'd do anything for her. She goes, please pull into the right-hand lane. I'm going, yeah, baby, anything you say. She goes, you have to wait till the intersection to turn right. I go, I don't want to. Please let me turn now. Because if you make those voices of self-doubt a little more interesting, then you'll begin to do more interesting things. You'll begin to try things. You'll begin to have that sense of adventure. Now, in a moment, I'm going to reach over, I'm going to touch you on the back of the hand, and I want you to go inside, and I want you to go deep into your unconscious now. And I want you to find that long-lost sense of adventure you had as a child. When you started to open a box, you didn't go, oh, don't open it. There might be a dead cat in there. You went, oh, my God, what's in this present? And, you know, that's why you peeked in your parents' closet. That's why, you know, when people said, whatever you do, don't open this. And you went, because curiosity can become overwhelming. And if you're really curious about your own future, then suddenly you start to look at the things that you hesitated to do, and you start to go, repeat the mantra. I went to India. I learned a lot of mantras there, and they were very confusing. I think there's only 2 that are really important. One is to have a voice inside your head that repeats the mantra over and over again while you meditate that goes, shut the fuck up, 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 shut the fuck up. And maybe you will. The other one is one that says, fuck it, and just goes for it. Because, you know, and you go, oh, you better not do this. What if people don't approve of you? And the voice goes, oh, fuck it, who cares? You know, that one's got me miles and miles. But, you know, people go, what are you doing? And I go, I got some voices are inside my head. You have to be careful about saying get outside. I got fined in court once for that. They said, don't say obscenity. And I went, obscenity? And they said, I told you not to say that. And I went, what? And he said, obscenity. And I went, and he said, no, you said an obscenity. And I went, an obscenity? I said, which one? And he wouldn't say it. He just fined me $1,000. But the thing is that if you get that sense of adventure going, you take that good feeling, and you start to look at your future, and you start to say to yourself, and you start to wonder, then suddenly a lot of things are going to really change if you get my thrust. Now, in a moment, I'm going to count to 3, and when I do, I want you to go from this deep state to being more awake than you've been in a long time, with a better understanding of what's a hallucinated snake and what's not. Because the snakes in your mind that tell you what you can't do and grumble about the past and relive past traumas over and over again, the ones that want you to go to therapy for the rest of your life, you can simply say, shut the fuck up, and start to look at things and go, do you know that ecstasy is always right around the corner? It's right here, it's right there, it's everywhere. 1, 2, 3, zzz. How you doing?
Ecstatic.
You're ecstatic. English say everything so much better than Americans, don't you think? Yeah, like aluminium. I love that word. I can't say it, but I love it. I went home and tried to say, I'd like my Coke in an aluminium can. And they said, oh, he's got a speech impediment. So, how about you? How are you doing?
I'm smiling inside.
You're smiling outside, too. That's okay. Even in business, you're allowed to smile. You know, smiles are very irresistible, I've heard. Are you married? Do you smile at your wife like that?
I do.
Good. Yeah, because next time you see her, I want you to think about this. And you know, if she starts to criticize you for something, if you look at her like this, she'll stop criticizing you. You just go. So I did it all the time at work. My wife would go, you were supposed to blah, 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 and I go. And if you do it long enough, you'll be surprised. Pretty soon it doesn't seem so important. And so all those hopes and dreams you have, you're going to give them up, right?
No.
You seem awfully determined about that.
Absolutely. Like
That's
an
right.
exocet.
You bet. Thank you very much, dear.
Thanks. Thanks, Richard.
Thank you, sir. I know that some of the demonstrations that I do are, of course, more dramatic than others. But it's not how dramatic something looks on the outside. It's how powerful it is on the inside. You can't get rid of unwanted feelings with wimpy little lightweight feelings. It's not through intellectualizing that people change. It's through bathing yourself in the good chemicals. At the unconscious level, and I mean the deep unconscious level, let's face it, all of our emotions have a neurochemistry. And that neurochemistry is something that most of us haven't explored. While we spend a lot of time feeling bad about things, being self-doubtful and being angry, we haven't spent a lot of time in every day feeling as good as we can. If you don't use muscles, they atrophy. Well, the same thing is true about the hormones and the enzymes and the neurochemistry. Psychology is now discovering, there's a psychologist now who's becoming somewhat very famous because he's come up with the notion that perhaps positive feelings are good. Hell, I knew that when I was 3, right? You know, I tried bad feelings and good feelings, and I think good feelings are better. When you take the good things in people and you expand them, it literally leaves very little time for people to feel bad. When I took depressives like Shirley, and Shirley was actually, she was in some ways a very tedious client. Talk about somebody that took patience. It took her so long to say something, it drove me nuts. I put her in a deep trance and I amplified the best feeling she ever had. I made her soften her skin. I made it so that it was from the inside out and the outside in. I left her for 2 hours in a deep trance, and I went out and took my dogs for a walk. And just because she hadn't relaxed in years. And I've done this a number of times. In a personal change workshop earlier in the year, this poor kid was so tense, he gnawed his fingernails off to the bone. Every single fingernail. It would kill me to do that. You know, but I mean, he was just a nervous wreck. I put him into a trance and I left him there, and I was doing things with other people. And people started going, well, is he going to be all right? For the first time in years, he's relaxed, and everybody was going, well, I don't know about this. He's relaxed for over 10 minutes. You know, he may never get out now. But the truth is, when he did come out some 2 hours later, for the first time, he had a real reference structure. It's been so many years since he really relaxed, he'd forgotten what it was about. And the truth is, the same thing is true about determination. The same thing is true about experimenting. I want all of you to really look at the things that are getting in your way and don't think of them as psychological issues. Think of them as an opportunity that this is the place to paint your life over and to take some great feeling and stick it where the other one is. It's your brain. You get to do what you want with it. When I wrote in 1985, I released a book called Using Your Brain for a Change. And the publisher said to me, he goes, that's a terrible title. And I said, but that's what the book is about. It's about using your brain to make changes so that you could change a belief deliberately. Now, I have a new book coming out in about 3 weeks, and it's called Conversations, and that's what it's about. It's about conversations that I had with someone. It's also about techniques that people can use to make themselves feel better for no reason. I personally think it's your birthright, and that all the worries and the doubts and all the stuff you've mastered, you're extremely good at it. And I can tell from the notes that you sent me that a lot of you haven't given it up yet. That you should do the same thing with your doubts that I did with your notes. Thank you very much. Yes, you my children, go forth and sin.